and talk about the ways in which certain phrases that speak to and mark conditions point up and shore up some of the discourse and the problems around how in North America, and particularly in the Canadian context right now, we deploy ideas and ideologies of free speech. So on many of our university campuses, we have attempts by senior administrators to ban the phrase Israeli Apartheid Week. So, and we've also seen this in relationship to gay pride in Toronto and so on and so forth. What's at stake is that there's a way in which, depending upon how language is used and the ways in which, and I'm going to use this crude language now, those in power decide the legitimacy of certain kinds of languages, or certain kinds of certain words, or the ideas attached to certain words, those words become either odious or not. So there's been now in North America an attempt to somehow make the word apartheid only apply to the former history of the history of the former South Africa, as though the conditions that structure an apartheid state cannot exist anywhere if so implemented. So outside of the kind of question of religion, let's take a phrase like Israeli apartheid and begin to think about what that means and the ways in which in the Canadian context, we have a committee of parliament in Ottawa trying to say that anyone who deploys this phrase is somehow immediately anti-Semitic. So we've got a range of different things at play here in relationship to language and how it works and who has the power and access to say what it should mean. That's at stake in this conversation here.
Susan, then Janet, and then we're going to do questions.
I just want to bring, because I am very glad you mentioned it, because I just want to bring it back to hate speech and and equity and discrimination, just regarding the use of the term Israeli apartheid. Is that what is so interesting about the use of the term is that nobody, not the Canadian Jewish Congress, not B'nai B'rith, not the City of Toronto, felt that they would use hate speech laws or the anti-discrimination in order to take the people to task for using that phrase. And my opinion is that the reason why they didn't is that they knew they would lose the case and that they could never make the case for it, that it was hate speech, because they didn't want to have the conversation, which brings me back to how I think hate speech laws actually do foster conversation.
I think they wanted to fight it in the court of public opinion as opposed to in the court of law.
They wanted, I'm sorry, what?
It seemed to me during the course of that debate that they wanted to fight it in the court of public opinion, not the court of law. Because they took on Israeli apartheid, in the court of public opinion. They went on the radio.
Because then they can obfuscate the meaning of the word apartheid and the conditions that one attaches to an apartheid state.
Well, they can object to it if they don't like the appropriateness of it.
Janet, or abuse their own power by just saying it is hate speech, which is what they were saying. This is anti-Semitic. And I would say, if you want to make that claim, go on and take it to a court and make the claim, and let's have the discussion, at which point all those people who are using that term would be saying, here's why we're using that term. And that, to me, I think is an interesting element of public discourse.
Okay, this audience has been patient, waiting to get in, and this guy's my hero because he's going first. Okay, you wanted to say.
It was not by choice, but it seemed like it ended up that way. Yeah, I just want to say it's been very interesting so far, and I thank everyone for their contributions, very stimulating. I know we kind of just got away from religion, but I actually wanted to return to it because I was waiting for people to bring it up, because it is so unique in the sense that religious belief can be maybe controversial, chosen and discarded, as opposed to things like being black or gay. So with the Muhammad cartoon and thing in particular, one thing I found kind of absurd about the debate from years back was that so many media outlets, namely Canadian ones, but worldwide, let's be honest, refused to print them because they would appeal to something like, well, we don't think it's relevant to the conversation, which I found kind of absurd because it was the entire conversation.
What do you think the truth was?
The truth?
If that wasn't the reason why they didn't publish, what do you think the real reason was?
Well, the real reason I think is a bit complicated and also kind of plays into our perception of Islam, I think, in the West in general. Because I think they didn't print them because they were scared. And why were they scared? Because they thought that an Islamic radical would kill them. And what does that show? It shows that a lot of people believe that there is a violent element in Islam that kind of, I think it reveals something about how we perceive Islam in the West. And it's funny how you'll see, I was just on a university campus not too long ago, as a student, and you'd see the word Islamophobia everywhere. And I just found it interesting because to me, the reaction of the Canadian press, and sorry, I should say the worldwide media in general, because I'd say most people did not run the cartoons, was in itself Islamophobic. Because you were basically, in not printing the cartoons and saying, oh, this is irrelevant, which I felt was just a ploy, you're saying, well, we really do believe if we do this, that our offices will be blown up.
TVO put them on the air for what it's worth.
Oh, very good.
That's the second plug tonight, Stephen, just for the record.
I can't help myself. 2 plugs an hour.
So basically, I want to bring that up because it reminds me of the whole, N-word, C-word thing where we can't even, talk about the very thing we're talking about. Paradox.
There really wasn't a question there, but it was a nice speech. Is there anybody? No. But is there anybody want to discuss?
I mean, sorry, no. Well, I mean, for me, the problem was there was no way to not be part of the story or not to participate in the story. I mean, that was the real challenge. If you print them, then you are saying it's legitimate to do this. If you don't, then you are, in a sense, silencing yourself.
Could I just add something here? I mean, I think that it's not just a question, do you print them or do you not print them, but is what is the context that you set for that?
Exactly.
And I think that people could perfectly legitimately print those cartoons and say, these are the cartoons about which you have been hearing. 12 of them really were published in Denmark. 3 more were added, and those tended to be the most, get an explanation going for why these things have taken on the dimension that they have of importance. So it's not yes or no.
Another question right here.
Hi, yes, my name is Sean Dalton. I published an essay on the 3 myths of Canadian immigration, and I sent it to PEN Canada, to I think Karen Paddleman or something. I think her first letter in the email, I never even received an email back. So the fear of talking about something as important as immigration, we're the only country in the world that's never had a discussion on it. And I don't think we're a multicultural society as we're multi-ethnic. I mean, I define Canadian culture as French, English, hockey, beer, and Christmas. We're also a warrior nation. We were in the Korean War, World War II, and we're fighting for democracy in the Middle East. And that's something Canadians believe in. I think that there's a civil war in Europe, between a clash of civilizations. And a paper did publish my essay.
Who published it?
A small paper, actually. It just kind of slipped my mind. But I entitled the essay, Slaughtering Sheep, the Planned Destruction of Canada's Sovereignty by Immigration, because we've taken such a low amount of people with English and French skills or in education.
Okay, I hate to interrupt you while you're on a real roll here, but I'm
Is
not
there
sure
a
that's the topic for tonight. So you got a question related to what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, one of you guys said wealthy people can buy whatever they want. I think Jen said it, but it's not true anymore. We have the internet, and it's basically leveled the playing field. So you can, and it doesn't isolate people to certain groups or demographics. It basically allows the world to engage in a conversation that they'd be too afraid of to talk about in public because they'd be shouted down or whatever. And actually, the internet regulates itself. Like, there's almost no swearing in the internet. You're supposed to be polite. You're supposed to be, dignified, and it's a very powerful.
There's almost no swearing on the internet? Are you reading the same things I am?
The chat rooms that I'm in are fairly
We're not on the same
polite. Like, I don't swear on the net.
Have you got a question emerging from all of this, or what?
Why aren't you guys talking about something like that? Why are you guys talking about the silliness of, language? Like, language creates misunderstandings. Why aren't you talking about the fact that if people can't understand each other, people aren't going to like the other person or listen on the subway? You never hear English or French anymore. I think that's a major problem in Canadian society. I think you guys should address something like that. The stuff you're talking about is kind of silly. Like,
Okay, I'm not sure that's, listen, I don't know if that's a topic for tonight or not, but if anybody wants to pick up on that, help yourselves. Anybody? Rinaldo.
I'll just say one thing. Claude Lanzmann, the great Euro-Jewish filmmaker, said, "Understanding is obscene." I think there's a great desire to understand, but understanding doesn't mean anything when we're faced with the ethical responsibility to protect someone who is radically different from ourselves. And that's really where, for me, the hub of this conversation is. So what does it mean for me to engage in conversations where I don't necessarily have to do harm to the person who's radically different from me, even though I want to engage them in a way that my difference doesn't have to be erased at all, and neither should theirs.
Okay, right here, please.
Can I? Oh, sorry. I just
Richard,
want to
you
say
wanna
something
pick?
quickly about the internet, too. That is not, to my mind, that is not an answer or response. I mean, we do need, ideally, in any kind of democratic political community, some places that can be seen as, common spheres
Public
of,
square?
Yeah, something like we call a public square. Now, obviously, all the deficiencies of the existing sort of central media newspapers, I mean, I'm not going to go in to, to describing all of the failings, but there was at least something that could count as a kind of a common place where different ideas were exchanged and a large part of the population might be exposed to it. Now, we seem to be at a place where that is, in fact, waning, and that's a problem. The internet is not an answer to that. It's so fragmented in character. We have a whole series of small communities who are talking to each other and not to others. And so I certainly don't want to see that as an effective answer.
Right here, please.
Thank you. Changing the topic slightly, I think I heard tonight from the panel, or some of the panel members, that what may be interpreted as hate speech may also be considered as somewhat of an affront to their human rights. Last fall, I heard another discourse on this similar topic, and a phrase stuck in my mind, and it said, the speaker said that there is not a human right to be not offended. And it's better to have it out there for everyone to see and hear and talk about than to have it hidden. Would you comment?
I'd be happy to.
Susan, then
Yeah,
Jen.
yeah.
I don't use the word offended.
Yeah.
I never use that word. I'm not interested in hate speech because to punish somebody. And I'm not interested in hate speech because somebody has done the wrong thing or has been a bad boy or girl. And I'm offended, can I say, all the time. So I'm easily offended. So I don't use that term. And I don't think that's what hate speech is about. It's really about having a major impact on people's lives and people's, and our ability to get on with our lives. It's not about, ew, I don't like that. It's not.
Janet.
Can I just say, two different thoughts came to mind. One is that there are people, I take it none of us, but there are people who argue that you've got a right to be spared being offended, and that's got to be nonsense, right? Absolutely nonsense, because people can take offense at literally anything, so that's just preposterous. But the other part of, the other thought that came to mind was the notion that it's better out there than buried. And again, I'd say that's one of the reasons why I want to see a generous protection for free speech and a broad range for expression. I don't want to give platforms and free advertising to the anti-Semites and so on, and the misogynists. But I feel that sometimes in Canada we've gone too far on the sort of politeness end of things, and you're not hearing what people think, but they still think it, and they're still going to act on the basis of it. And I personally would rather hear it.
Richard?
I actually find that when people describe hate speech laws as being about offense, it's usually those who are opposed to hate speech laws, and it's a way of trying to undermine, what they may be about, because, as is said, that of course, if we're talking about simply a subjective experience, then anybody could understand, anybody can say they could be offended to anything. So suddenly the law becomes empty, meaningless, and so forth. And we really have to remind ourselves that although we might be talking about some kind of personal experience, if we're talking about intimidation, things like that, that is much more substantial than simply the mere experience of offense.
Right here, please.
Oh, my name is Franklin Carter, and I do work for the Freedom of Expression Committee of the Book and Periodical Council. I have a specific question for you. This year, the Supreme Court of Canada will hear the case of William Walcott. Bill Walcott is a self-described Christian truth activist who delivered anti-gay leaflets from door to door a few years ago in Saskatchewan. He succeeded in offending 4 people, 3 gay men and a lesbian, who complained to the Provincial Human Rights Commission. A human rights tribunal subsequently ruled against Walcott and awarded the complainants $17,500 for the loss to their dignity. Since then, both parties have appealed the ruling up the judicial ladder. The provincial human rights law that was used to censure Walcott makes it illegal to tend to expose protected minorities from hatred, ridicule, or contempt. Truth is apparently not a defense. I wonder if this broad ban on group defamation can be reconciled with a broadly defined charter guarantee of free expression for all Canadians. What are your thoughts on this dispute, and what do you think the Supreme Court of Canada will do?
Can I just ask, do you have any information on what those pamphlets said? That would really help me in giving an answer. Oh, good. You can start.
You start.
Anything on that, Franklin?
Thank you
Let's
for
just
the
see if he's
question.
going to
I
answer
can
your
show it to
question.
you after. I mean, they're long pieces.
They condemned the use of pro-gay or gay-friendly programs in public schools in Saskatchewan. And he delivered them door to door in Regina and Saskatoon.